Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the Fashion is Inclusivity, Diversity Within Sustainability panel. And I am going to let these lovely ladies introduce themselves. I have Abrima, Celine, and Ngozi is on the way. So why don't you two just introduce yourselves really quickly?
Abrima?
I don't know who you are. Okay, sure. Hi, my name is Abrima Uria. I'm the co-founder of a brand called Studio 189 that's based between the United States and West Africa in Ghana. And we basically have a brand that exists to use fashion as an agent of social change, working along the value chain, connecting the dots from farmer to consumer, making women's wear and men's wear clothes, and preserving traditional techniques.
Amazing.
My name is Celine DiCarlo. I am the VP of Brand, People, and Culture at Hoffman, which is based in Manhattan. And this is our 20th year. And about 5.5 years ago, we shifted towards working within a more sustainable framework. And very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm assuming, I guess, should we get started?
We're laughing. Well, Rima, you can say why we're laughing.
We're laughing because I know this is a serious panel, but it's still funny. We're laughing because right before the panel, I'm Ghanaian and she's Nigerian. And we were making Ghana Niger jokes. And we're like, you Nigerians, you're always late. And she's like, no, they're Ghanaians. And now we've lost Ngozi. So please continue.
She's not helping her case right now. No. That's hilarious. Well,
no, she's not.
We're going to get started because the first few questions, anyone can hop in and hopefully she'll join soon. I don't know what's going on.
I just texted her.
Awesome. Okay. So right now, we've noticed that, and I think a lot of this is due to social media, which is kind of like, you're here and go. Well, do you want to also, Abrima was talking about how you would be late. I'm not sure, but I just want to, I just want to put that out there.
Tell Abrima I was late making the perfect jollof rice.
Hey. 2 more seconds. I was going to go after jollof.
Ngozi, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Sure. My name is Ngozi Okaro. I lead Custom Collaborative, which is a nonprofit social enterprise focused on providing opportunities for women from low-income and immigrant communities to have careers in sustainable fashion. So I'm really excited to be here today representing myself and the ladies who trust us with their time and their money.
Amazing. So let's just hop right into it. I was just talking a little bit before you hopped on about how we are having more conscious conversations largely due to social media. And one of the conversations that we're having right now is about sustainability. And fashion has really, become an integral part of this conversation. They've been very involved in this conversation. But one thing that we have noticed with a lot of social issues and conversations around them is that the I guess loudest voices are often white, or the most prominent voices are white. So how have each of you contributed to more sustainable fashion, and why is it critical that people of color's voices are amplified in this conversation? Anyone can go in.
So then let me jump in. At Custom Collaborative, the work that we do centers women of color. And in addition to educating them and ourselves around the many ways of sustainability and as they evolve, but just listening to them about what they say about sustainability, learning and using what their practices have been. And I think that especially in Black American, Black African communities that I'm aware of, sustainability and using things to their fullest and really having respect and kinship with the land has always been important and a tradition. And so we're really working to amplify that in collaboration with others. And for us, sustainability means not just the environmental, but also human rights and living wage. So that's a big focus for us.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to echo what you're saying as well. I think just because your question was, why do you see, to make sure I understood correctly, more white people in the sustainability space versus people of color? And I think, it's like Ngozi said, I mean, culturally, indigenous people are inherently sustainable. Like it's not really a thing. I mean, I know we're using the word and I know that it's being amplified and I know there's reasons behind it because there's a need to kind of give it shape and preserve. But I think that, the fundamental principles, which is why I believe I like it so much. And I like so many of the people that are working inside this space are that are more community based driven and that are like very conscious, and that is how we've always operated. Like there wasn't enough, like there was an abundance, but then there also wasn't enough, so like we share clothes, like we don't throw things away. We use things. I mean, some of the things I use, you don't want to know how long I use it, but we use things to their fullest potential. We do most of our work in West Africa, and kids use over and over and over again, things are repaired. I even myself had to relearn, when I got there, if something was broken, I'd have this inclination to want to buy another one because that's what we kind of do now in the West. But you don't do that. It's broken, you fix it. You fix everything. No part goes unused. And also because you have this kind of personal accountability to have, just thinking about secondhand clothing, for example, Ghana, Nigeria, all this, but like that's the last stop. So there isn't another place where it's going. So you're kind of personally accountable for figuring out what to do with the things around you, which makes you so much more conscious because if there's toxins, if there, all that stuff gets in the waterways, it affects you, it affects your health, it creates malaria, it creates disease. So you don't want any of those things, and so I just think that you kind of inherently on every, environmentally, and humanitarian wise and in every kind of way. And also just like how you use money within a community is inherently sustainable. And the things that are not sustainable are things that are coming from outside. And what we're trying to do, I think all of us as a community, is kind of take a step back and remind people, hold on a second, before you get very excited about plastic, let me remind you what plastic does. You can't burn it, et cetera, because people have been told to start using these things. We want to kind of preserve it before it's too late, because that's, for me, Africa and a lot of indigenous communities are the last stop. And we need to protect what they're doing so we don't, ruin this planet.
Absolutely. Celine, can you talk a little bit about what Mara Hoffman, the brand, has been doing and how they have specifically showed up as an ally when it comes to fashion sustainability and, partnering with communities of color? And also, if you could add on any advice that you would have for companies that are largely white to step up as allies and make room for just more diversity and equity when it comes to fashion and sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every white person who answers this question tends to state this, and it's important to do so, that we're not a company that does it right or perfectly, but we are one that it is at the crux of daily conversations. So it's interesting because I feel like this word ally is quite a new one that has entered lexicon within DEI, and it's almost this tool that a lot of white people are using to make themselves feel better, but actually in doing so you continue to others. So I just to start off by saying we don't use that word. It's not part of our semantics internally as a company. What is recognition and reckoning massively, because when we shifted as a brand towards sustainability, we didn't do so. We did what we could with what we had, is always the statement, but we didn't do it right in the sense, if you're really going to shift towards sustainability, especially if you're in the apparel industry, it has to be done through the lens of social, racial, and environmental justice. Otherwise you're just making certain shifts externally, but you're not really approaching the company at a systemic level. So, I just want to be clear in terms of that's where we were. And what did that look like? It's easy and difficult at times to be there to just give money. And though that is critical, again, we had to go deeper. So yes, there were the donations. Yes, there was the fabric donations. But then we really started to think about what it is that we had that we could give and share. And one of those was our showroom. And so we lent that out free of charge to various organizations and missions that we aligned with to host events, pro bono, be it graduation ceremonies for Custom Collaborative, be it workshops that looked at dismantling racism within the apparel industry, and just really figuring out how we could be of service within our own community. I think, again, with the apparel industry, it's very easy to speak about, I'm going to start up this campaign and that campaign, but where's the work? Where's the boots on the ground work? Where are you showing up on a grassroots level within the community? And so, especially as it pertains to, let's say, women's empowerment and economic advancement, it's one thing to do a hashtag and speak about it, but are you working with a partner like a Custom Collab to really push those agendas forward? So I think it's about, obviously, the giving, the showing up, the being of service. The rallying of consumers was a big one for us as well. So while we were taking action, we became much more vocal on a socio-political level in 2016 for obvious reasons. And then we just stuck to that. And at first, and I think a lot of brands can go through this very honestly of, I don't want to be divisive and I don't want to take sides. Well, that's gone. That's out the window now. And so we obviously have to, and we are that voice. And so now we also use our platform as a company to rally our consumers to say, especially white consumers, the onus is on you. What are you doing to shift and dismantle, to learn, dismantle, unlearn, rebuild, and restructure? Because you can't dismantle and then rebuild a system in the same way. It's a full-on restructure, and we have to do that as a company. We're not there yet internally. We've always been very diverse with how we've casted, with the models that we've used. But internally as a company, we have a ways to go in terms of getting our diversity numbers up, ensuring our inclusion policies are in place, and then also looking at equity and ensuring that we have women of color within those more senior leadership roles. But that's something, again, that is discussed all the time. So I think when it comes to advice for white-led companies, it's really getting over, first of all, the white paralysis, I call it, of like, oh, I don't know what to do. I would say to not speak until action is taken, looking internally as well as externally, to not fear copying what other companies are doing that resonates with you, because this isn't a territorial issue. This is about taking the responsibility as white people who are profiting off of a system that was built for white people on the backs of Indigenous and Black and Brown communities. And again, as I said before, dismantling and restructuring it. And that might mean restructuring an entire company. That might mean eradicating some positions and building out new ones and ensuring that those hires are people of color. And I'd say the last thing is, it's easy to also implement DEI policies, but, do those companies understand what that means? And obviously I'm speaking to the white companies right now of, diversity is an easier numbers game. Inclusion is very different. Equity is very different in and of itself. And I guess the last thing I would say is community. Community is everything. What are you doing to uplift those around you? When are you stepping back and shutting up and listening? And when are you speaking up? And if you're speaking up, are you by someone's side? Are you behind them? Or are you in front of them? And that's, it's the nuance that's very critical.
Can I add to Celine's kick-ass response?
Yeah.
I think it's such an interesting moment in history. I think about this all the time, and it ties to also what Celine was just saying, because we're at a turning point, really, right? Turn of the century, everything is changing. Everything we knew, everything is changing, and people don't know which way to turn sometimes. Like, how do I begin with all of this? And, all these rules, all these, systems that were put into place, in my mind, they served us for some time. They might not have served me specifically, but they served, in some way, people for some time, and they held up, but they were not necessarily the most, like you said, inclusive or the best kind of systems. And it's time to change them. It's like, okay, good. You did that. You built whatever you needed to do. It's done. And so to me, I think a lot about, whenever I have these kinds of conversations, and that's why I love what Celine said, is what are your values? Like it completely starts there, because if you don't check those values, and you said something about how you can't dismantle a system if you're just going to use those, like the system's values to take it apart and build it back again. You got to start again, or you have to check your values. And what I love about both the women on the panel, and what I love about, if we're talking about allies or whatever that word is that Celine was talking about, is that a lot of times it's about even being invisible. Even for me, a lot of times it's the stuff you said, boots on the ground. A lot of times it's the stuff that nobody knows you're doing. I know in Gozi you do stuff that nobody knows you're doing. It's like you don't need to know what I'm doing. What you need to know is that, every time I have a chance to do the right thing, I'm going to do my best. And sometimes I'm going to make a mistake, but my intention, like I started by setting my intention, is to do the right thing. And the right thing is relative, maybe, but it's still a level of consciousness. And it's all the things that Celine said, but I think that's really important, because a lot of times people want to fix it, as if it's going to be done tomorrow. This isn't going to be done tomorrow. This is going on for hundreds of years, and it's going to continue on for hundreds of years. So you're going to at some point have to decide what matters more to you. Do you need to be a trillionaire? And think of like, what is a trillionaire? Why do you need trillions of dollars? Is it really important to be a billionaire or a trillionaire when you know that half the world is making less than $1? Like I think about that with Studio 189, and I remember that moment of realization I might have had 2 years ago when I was like, we're never going to be a big company. It's just not, we're just never, and the reason is because we know too much. I know too much about what somebody else goes through. I know their name. I know their family. I know if they're sick today. I know if they just got in an accident. I know if they need medical, I may or may not be able to fix it, but I know so much about it that I can't be a trillionaire, because to do that, you have to do that off the back of somebody else. And so I do think that a lot of it is like, if you remove the PR part, it's really asking yourself what matters more to you and how can you use your platform, whatever that might be. And that's something I really admire about both the women, because I've been to these events that Mara Hoffman's studio does that they have no need and no reason to do. And I don't know anybody else who does events like this at their space, and no one will ever know they did them. But they have the space and they opened it up, and they say yes to things with even half knowledge because they know it's the right thing to do. And they show up with like full support. And that's what you need. I feel like so many people show up with support, but then, and I can go, I know you know about, you got to check all these things. We want to help you, but you got to do this, and then we're going to sit on your head. And then you have to say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then you have to sing and dance for us. And at the end of all of this, we're going to give you $1,000 to support the project. That's not support
at all.
Yeah.
Talk about, because, and you both touched on just like thinking about sustainability in this like larger lens. And even when the panel was first presented to me, I was like, oh, sustainability, earth, soil, water, like just very like basic level. But there is a a much larger conversation. And I don't think people think about like the economic welfare of people or just the welfare of people in general. So Ngozi, can you talk a little bit about, because you've created, both of you, Abrima and Ngozi, and Celine with Mara Hoffman as well, but you've all created opportunities for people of color to earn wages through design and production of sustainable fashions. Can you talk a bit, Ngozi, about how creating these opportunities for people who are disproportionately left out of the fashion space directly correlates to sustainability?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And sustainability, when I first started doing this work with Custom Collaborative, so around 2015, it was strictly about organic cotton. And at that point, we were talking about something that hadn't been talked about as much, but at least was on the table, which was dead stock, which is what we use, fabric that is not needed and is overflow. And from the beginning, I started Custom Collaborative out of my concern for my particular dressmaker, because she wasn't charging me as much money as I thought that she could in order to make these great dresses. And so from the beginning, that was baked in. I think it's easier for some people to forget that part of sustainability because we're talking about people who society has othered, right? And so if we're saying, one, we don't know who made our clothes, and that two, they were probably made overseas or whatever, and they were made by women, and they were made by, non-white women. It's easy to almost disappear them, right? And so then sustainability doesn't come into the picture. But the people who largely make our clothes are the people who are most affected by climate change and these environmental issues. So it seemed to me, and it still does, that like these are the people who should be centered. These people should be centered not only in thinking about their habitats, but also their lives. Like, what difference does it make if we use organic cotton to make our socks if the people who are making those socks still receive sub-poverty wages? So I think it's all part of a whole. Like, if we take care of the environment and the whales and the dogs and the goats, all of which I'm in support of, we have to be taking care of the people. And if we don't think of the people, then it seems to me what we're saying is we don't value them, we don't see them as equals. So I think that this is, great opportunity for everyone to be engaged and to have agency. And like, honestly, the women in our programs have come up with some really great sustainability ideas for our products and for their own that I would never have thought of and that I hadn't heard before. So I think that they add a great voice. I'm happy to be aligned with them.
Amazing. Abrima, I want to talk to you about Studio 189 in particular, because the price point leans more towards luxury. Like, it's not your, everyday fast fashion prices. How do you justify the price points to people who may automatically assume that sustainable fashion is going to be cheap or more accessible?
So when we started, I made a very specific and concerted effort with the pricing. So it's actually interesting because our pricing is not really, we position ourselves as luxury, but it's more like affordable luxury. So like by American standards, it's kind of contemporary pricing, a little upper, because our shirts are like $175, right? But by what people understand, like African made or Black made products to be, it's very expensive, and there's a few very intentional decisions that I made when I did that. One is it's really expensive to make stuff. Like, people, fast fashion is fascinating. It skews your belief on how much it actually costs to create. Just like what they did with the food industry in some capacity, where they, subsidize, and people don't understand how much work goes into making something. So a lot of our products, for example, wovens, they're expensive. For me, like, we don't even, sometimes the margin is very small, very, very small. And so it puts people at a very precarious position, because if you ask for too many discounts, which stores do that a lot, if you, if you don't pay, which people do also a lot, then somebody eats that cost, and that work is expensive because it takes a really long time to weave fabric, and it takes a really long time to do all this stuff, to grow it, to spin it, to weave it, to dye it, and that's like a baseline cost, right? Like, if I was doing what I really wanted, it would be more expensive, because I would love to have more money to be able to supply like more needed benefits to people, in communities that don't have access. The second thing is, I think there's a misunderstanding of how expensive it is to do work. Like, when you're in remote communities, for example, I remember I was in Ivory Coast once, and the toothbrush was like $100 or so. I don't know, it's like crazy. Like, I pay more for electricity in Ghana than I pay here. Like, you have to think, like, it's actually, people have this idea that Africa is very cheap and it'll be cheaper, or in certain communities in the United States that are rural, it's going to be cheaper, but your lifestyle oftentimes is way more expensive. And a lot of people who are operating at the lower levels of economics are actually spending way more for basic services. I mean, look at the tax brackets. People who are up here, some of them are not even paying taxes. And people who make almost nothing are spending so much money in taxes. So, there's that. And then there's also the perception. I wanted to shift the perception, because there's a conception, and then it trickles down that people are valued less. And it's really unfair. If you take two equal products or two equal people, why is it in your mind that this one should be, I bought it in the market, it's $2, and I don't care about it, and I throw it away? And this one should be, to Gucci, $3,000, and you don't even hesitate and you spend your money. The consequence of that is that this one, that's Gucci or whatever brand you like, creates so much economic value for those people. And in your mind, you wear it with pride, you get that great job, and it starts to escalate all your activities. And this other one that you've decided is worth nothing, which is actually not true at all, you've now discounted to like throwaway stuff. And it's very untrue. And so, to me, I think it's important when you're looking at things like natural indigo, you need to value that at the price that it actually costs to produce it, to make it, so you can create more equity along everybody in the value chain. And I try to kind of price accordingly. And it's not the easiest because sometimes customers don't understand. And we have to take the extra time to re-explain why it takes longer, why it's not the price that they should think it should be. And if you ask me for a very big discount, I might say yes, Essence. I'm not saying you will. But when you do it, I will explain to you who's losing when you ask me. I'm like, I'll give it to you. If you think $30 is going to hurt you, $30 in another person's pocket is 150 CDs, which could feed a family for a week. $30 you're going to spend on coffee. Are you sure you really want that discount, or are you just doing it because you think it should be cheaper? And then once the person realizes it, they go, oh, I actually had no idea how much it costs to make clothes. And so I think clothes should be valued at their price. I think we need way less stuff. People would honor the materials and the workmanship. And I think we need to rethink how we honor the people that are doing the work. So it's not so skewed and, design in one country is up here, and, the workmanship and the craftsmanship for the people who are doing the work is way down here. And I just want to close by saying one more thing, because it was tied to what Ngozi just said, when you said about sustainability and the environment. I feel like if people don't want to do it because they care about somebody else, then okay, fine, don't. Do it because you're selfish. Because if you think that you're living in a silo where you're not affected by what happens to somebody somewhere else, I think we're watching the planet right now, and that is not true. You are completely immediately, like as soon as, I think about that a lot, the toxins in the water, those fish, the chicken that you're eating, it gets re-imported back to your country. You'll eat that chicken and you will get cancer. So when you make your choices about how you want to live your life, trust me, whatever you think, if you think those people don't matter, that food, it ping pongs right back to you, all those natural resources, all those raw materials, and you'll suffer the effects. I think we've now seen this is not something we can do alone. It's something we need to do together, and we need to value it accordingly.
Absolutely. Celine, I wanted to talk to you a little bit. Right now, we're in the middle of a fight for racial equality. I mean, we always are, but right now we're seeing so much with the protests. How do companies show up for Black lives, not only in these like recurring instances of social injustice, but also in the day-to-day of how they treat and advance Black employees, how they treat Black consumers, and specifically in terms of sustainability in Black and Brown communities being more vulnerable to those issues, which we've seen in recent examples with like Flint, Michigan. I still don't even believe they have clean drinking water. And Newark, New Jersey, I know had like a water crisis. How does a more sustainable business model in fashion positively impact disadvantaged communities?
I wish there was a straightforward answer to that. And there's a few parts to the question. So I'd say in terms of showing up for these reoccurring instances of social, racial injustice, and injustices, put it lightly, I think we can all speak to the brutal murders in broad daylight that are happening, mostly to Black men at the hands of white police. I think that when it comes to companies, there has to be, when we go back and speak to that DEI piece and diversity is checking off the numbers, it's really that inclusion piece that is critical. For us, a big takeaway and learnings over the years has been focused on the trauma that is caused to our employees that are, and we're 97% women, so I speak mostly women, there's only one dude in the company, but the women of color in our office and how it affects them on a mental health level. And so being very cognizant as a company of what we see in the news and how that then affects our employees and reaching out with, reiterating the policy of taking days off if needed, or taking wellness days, or pushing the importance of mental health. I think that's a huge piece of it. Then there's always other inclusion initiatives that need to happen so that you're creating a culture within your company that is safe, and not just in that sense of creating a harmonious space. Actually, it's quite the opposite. I believe that for us, a safe space is one in which open dialogue can happen. And so are we creating an environment whereby women of color, if they feel like they need to address an issue or they are experiencing microaggressions in some way, be it out in society or within the company, that we have a space where that can be spoken to, and there can be real raw talk about that, and there's not going to be that defense from white colleagues. And I think there's also that impetus around the equity piece of who are the members of senior leadership, what are the career progression paths that we can create. And I think when it comes to Black consumers, it's the same thing. We at times we'll have Black consumers reach out with what they have felt to be issues of microaggressions, be it in some of our assets or in the past semblances of cultural appropriation. And we take that very seriously and we respond. We engage in that conversation, and we do it, and Mara is very intent on this. We do it in a message of gratitude. It's never of defense, because even if we feel as white people that we don't see what it is that's being pointed out, well, it just speaks to our blindness. Right. And that's the way in which we work. And we really try and implement that company-wide, and so a few years back, we had an all-white creative team that was focusing on visual assets that mostly featured women of color. And, one day it was this, wait a second, this is so wrong. And so really figuring out, again, what I was saying in terms of restructuring a company and rehiring, so that, that there is a relevant perspective within the company that is what is also spoken about and shown visually externally. And then I think when it comes to speaking to those Black and brown communities that are most vulnerable, especially right now, I think, it's sad that it takes a pandemic for people to actually see in front of them that it's Black and brown communities that are disproportionately affected by climate change, by pandemics that are happening right now. And so I think as a company, it's critical to keep that front of mind. Like, there should not be another murder in order for us to create a Black Lives Matter campaign. There shouldn't be another death in Flint, Michigan in order for us to then speak about the water crisis and the lack of the administration's protection of its, as a civil right to actually protect its people. It shouldn't be a trend. And that enrages me personally a lot with these brands, is these social media campaigns that literally make me want to spit, because it's a big FU to those communities. And so it's about keeping these issues front of mind, and that is on white people and white-led companies. The onus is on us to keep that, to make sure that our consumers are taking action, that they're signing petitions, that they're lobbying, that they're acting as advocates themselves, that there is an election coming up in almost 50 days, and you sure as hell be registered, getting a ballot, knowing where your polls are, and assisting others in disadvantaged communities in states where there are these new laws popping up to make sure that those communities are held back from actually voting and creating the shift that this country needs, so we're no longer under a white supremacist dictator anymore. And so I think it's like, in that tone of voice as a company, you have to be forward facing. And so I would just say that with companies, it's knowing when to be quiet, knowing when to speak, knowing when to show up, knowing when to take yourself out of a situation if you don't see enough Black and brown people with you on a stage, saying, I'm not doing this unless there's greater representation and a diversity of voices. And if, they can't change the programming, then take yourself out. What the hell, what does it matter? Right. And to you. So I could go on. There's a lot that I think companies, white-led companies especially, can do. And I guess the last thing I would say is, once people become more aware, if you see something that's in writing or you see something that's positioned wrong, you don't just reach out to your to your friends or peers of color and say, oh my God, can you believe this just happened? You take action. You step up and say something. You say, you shouldn't be positioning it this way. You shouldn't be saying it that way. You shouldn't be turning just to Black women and brown women and say, oh, I want you to create this committee to lead this charge. No, you are that oppression. And so I think it's just thinking and acting in such a way. I have to take the last word.
Ngozi, I saw you wanted to say something.
I did, and thank you so much, Celine, for saying so many of the things to some of the people who can hear it from you, who might not hear it from me or Brima or Essence. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Another thing I wanted to say about consumers that I don't know if companies think about, but as a consumer, I have been treated poorly in some instances, to me, seemingly because I'm Black, right? But now that I have like this whole plethora of Black owned and brown owned companies that I can buy from, like the other companies better step it up. Cause I could just decide I'm not buying anything unless it's from somebody Black or brown, right?
Yes.
Like my husband just gave me a beautiful set of wine glasses for my birthday. I'm like, okay, I don't need to buy any more Spiegelau or Shot Duzel or whatever. I don't even need to go to their stores, right? And so then the question is for these companies, is it important for you to be exclusive? Is that more important than having the customers buy your goods that you might want? So how do you treat people both in your companies and in your stores, right? And. So I think it's an important moment, and hopefully people will continue to push to make us better.
Ladies, I think this is the end of our panel. I just want to say thank you so much. Y'all all, like, I'm from the South, so we always say, like, you took me to church, like, y'all took me to church. Like, it was just so, everything that you said was so valid and so true, and it was so, like, on time for the moment that we're in right now. So thank you all so much. And you have a lot of fans in the comments, a lot of fans. I saw a few people say that they need you guys to run for president. So consider that. But
Abrima for president. Abrima, shout out to your Fashion Our Future 2020 campaign.
yes,
and for all the people who've been around that civic engagement. So thank you to Abrima for that.